Hi guys, and welcome back here to the Dev Realm, and today we're gonna be carrying on our series. And if you guys remember what we did in the last episode for our MMO framework is that we have set up this awesome character here. We just make it so we can use him to play around and do all sorts of things. Alright, so the idea of the video today is that we're gonna be creating some kind of a character creation that we're going to be used to, or choose if you want to set up a male or female character, and then later on we're going to be using those values to send on the server and basically setting up so you can refresh and reload this to your game. All right, so to do this, I duplicate this scene here. All right, keep in mind I may crash your engine. I'm not sure why it does that, but I just duplicated the test scene. I'm going to open up here the character creation. All right. And what I'm going to do here is that I am going to go back to the main. I'm going to go back to blueprints, and I have player. I'm going to just rename this folder to call game modes. All right. Now, sometimes you see that Unreal Engine does this. All you got to do is just go back here and you right click and you press, not this, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Sometimes it duplicates the folder. I don't know why it does, because probably what it does is just creates a clone. I don't need this folder anyway. Right, so I'm gonna right click inside the game mode. So I'm gonna create here the main game play, right? So imagine that you have a game, and basically what we're trying to do here is that we are creating two game modes. One is the one where you play with a character, where you walk around, you use your items and all sorts. And the other one is where you basically create the character. I'm just going to move all this stuff there. I'm going to right click and I'm going to call this character creator. All right. I'm going to save everything. Now, the next thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to do this in a lazy way. I'm just going to right click here. I don't have the option, but I'm just going to hold Control C. I'm going to go back to the character creation and press Control V. All right, I'm just going to copy the whole thing. For now, it doesn't matter. Right, there's a couple of things we have to do. First of all, we need to change this the character creator gameplay. MMO character creator. And now here, we're going to call this BP character creator controller. All right. All right, so first thing I'm going to do here is that make sure you're on the right scene for the character creation. I'm going to drag and drop this right there. I'm going to save everything. All right. I'm going to open up this, the game mode, and make sure you first add the character to the default player pawn class and the player controller you added right here. So we're going to, yeah, that's the right place. So the idea here is that we're going to basically create, we just duplicate the things. Now, if you press play, everything is going to look the same, right? Now, one thing I would like to change is that I want to basically now go on my player, on, let's say, in the chest, legs, yeah, the skeletal man. Why is that? Anyway. So we go here, the skeletal mesh, which is right here. And I want to look for meshes. That is the male part. So we got the head. Let me just go back to the modular mesh. So we got the player demo. I'm looking to see if there is any model that we can maybe try with parts like with the naked player, so the character, so we don't have to, so we can default to a creation screen. But anyway, that doesn't look like we have here, or it's possible. Let me check what's that chest about. So that chest is basically this one without any kind of skin. Let me just double check what happened. What happened if I put this on chest here? What would happen? Plot and save. I think why it doesn't allow me to change. So let's check the legs. Just open up here. So if I press play, let's check. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we got our character defaulted with the demo, like body parts. So what we're gonna do here is that we are just gonna revert the way it was. Make sure we got the reverted stuff. Right. For some reason it's empty here. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Even when I refresh it, it's basically saying it's known. It's not necessarily true, but I think it's when you copy and paste, it throws some errors or it does some weird stuff. But that's fine. So let me see if I can find. So this is the CR. That's the chest. I'm trying to find male parts, but that's fine. Anyway, let me just open up here. Right. So we're gonna create here a character creator. There's a couple of things that we can change, right? We can change the hair. We can change a couple of things. Unfortunately, this model is quite limited on which parts you want to create, right? So what I'm going to be doing here is that I'm going to basically create more materials. So for example, here I have this red material, right? I would like to create more materials to change, let's say maybe, to blue or to whatever they call. So we're going to be changing our character material rather than the mesh. But it will be the same process if you have more character materials. I'm gonna probably change I'm gonna give the options to change the hair. So you guys, if you have a model that supports that, you can use that as a base point. But also we're gonna be using that to change our player, belt and all that stuff, right? So with all that stuff in mind, we have our design properly set up, right? The first thing I want to do here is that I want to select so this is our player start. I'm going to delete the player start. When you delete the player start, basically it spawns where is the camera. But in this case, I want to make it so the player, let me just add here on the windows, we have content, viewports, where is place actors. That's the one. I like to put the place actors here. And here I'm gonna search for the player start. The reason why I deleted from that is because I like to do this. It's easy to drag and drop. Now if I press play, I'm gonna start it from here, right? Now the thing I would like to do here for this scenario is that I would like to re-inverse the camera, right? Because imagine that you're on a character creator. You want to face the player like this, right? So I'm gonna get the camera and let me double check. Can I do this? No, it doesn't allow me to do it. Would allow me to do that? It would. So maybe I'm gonna have to do something like this. So if I do minus 400 on the target arm length, as you can see, the camera, it's facing the other way now. Now all you gotta do is that you want to change the camera rotation to be like that, which is gonna be 180 degrees, right? There we go. Now if I press compile and save, I should be able to be facing my player. Now the problem that we have here is that it's still going to be able to move the character, so we don't want the player to be able to move the character. One thing I notice here is that this object here, I just want to make sure that the rotation is going to be like 180 as well, all right? It's about 180. Because it's like taking a picture, right? You always show with the light first. Maybe, yeah, that's fine. We're gonna leave it like this for now. Right, so how can we prevent our player or our user to move our character pieces? So like how can you prevent from the player to even move the camera, right? So what we can do here is that, first of all, I would like to disable the movement. I would like to disable the jump at all. I don't want this. And also would like to disable the camera input. All right, file and save. So now I can't move, right? I can't do anything in essence. And as you can see, my mouse is started, I can't see my mouse. So when you are in the character creation, the only thing you would like to be able to see, unless you are mobile, is the mouse, right? So to fix that, it's very easy. We're gonna go back here to our player controller. Oh, I just noticed that it's BO. That's the, is that it? Character creator controller. That should be BP, stands for blueprint. Right, so now what we need to do here is that when we start, we're gonna set mouse cursor or set show cursor, or that's the one, set show mouse cursor, right? We're gonna do this, make sure it's enabled, and if I compile and save this, now I have my mouse here all times, and we can set game mode to, we want to set to game mode and UI, right? Right. The controller, we're just gonna use self because it's a reference to himself, right? And I can compile and save, and now here I have like my player is static. So now we can start work in the UI here. Right, so the easy way to do this is that we're gonna first create our UI, and then after we may use some skin or something to make it look pretty, but let's make it functional first. All right, so the important thing is that you learn how to make this function first. There's many ways you can go about this, and I am gonna try to create, for the most part, like proper ways of integration. Sometimes it gets too complicated, it gets too into parts, like it gets too hard for the user to follow, but I'm gonna try to make creating reusable and the way I would properly create a game with this framework. So the idea here as well is, just to give you some context, is that we want to make this as usable as possible to make this into production, create games and all sorts. So I'm going to close this stuff. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to the blueprint class, and I'm going to search for actor component. So an actor component is a reusable component that can be attached to any actor. Remember, our player is an actor, so we can use that, right? And we're going to rename this to BPC, which stands for blueprint component, and we are gonna call this character creation UI. All right, now the idea is that when we start this component, it's gonna show the UI, it's gonna show the fields, it's gonna show everything, right? So how does this work? Right, so the way this works is that we're gonna attach this to the player controller. You can attach that to the player or to the player himself, but I like to attach to the controller because in this way I already have the instance of the controller, and then I just need to get the instance of the player, which is not a big deal. Right, so I'm gonna drag and drop this right here, right? And I am just gonna rename this to the character creation component. All right, or let's just call CCC my creation component. Let's just give a name that we can remember after, right? Now that we've done this stuff, we need a couple of things. First of all, we need to find a way to change the player parts, but the most important of all is that we need to get the reference to this part. So in essence, we need to access this instance on our component that we just created. All right, and you're probably asking, but how am I going to do this? So it's very easy, man. It's not complicated. All you got to do is just follow a couple of steps. So we got a couple of options here. First option is that on the component, we can just reference the player controller, which has the reference to the character creator, or you can pass both of reference on the player, on the component, and then we can choose which one to use. So in programming, there is this concept of oriented programming. basically there's this concept where you want to make sure that your code is most reusable as part, right? So you don't need to basically keep repeating yourself. Don't repeat yourself, right? This is a concept in programming. So what I'm going to do here is that on the player controller right here, right, I am gonna pass the reference to the player component right here. So I'm gonna go to variables. I'm gonna create here the player controller ref, and this we can set up to different types. We can also use player controller, right? But the problem with this is that we're gonna have the reference of our character in the player controller anyway. So I am just gonna search for BP. Just search here for BP character controller. Character controller. Make sure you choose the object reference. Make sure that it's you click on the I, so it means it's public. And you don't need to expose and spawn because we don't need to do anything. Since we're not doing anything replicated, we don't need to worry about this because this is gonna probably happen on your local machine. Unless, yeah, that's not gonna be replicated. But anyway, so the next step that we're gonna do here is that on the player controller, right, we kind of need to pass the reference to the object. So what we can do here is that we can bring this object. By the way, this has the wrong name. Let's just rename that. And in here we can set the player controller reference. And then you're probably asking yourself, but okay, where do I get the player controller? You already are on the player controller. So all you gotta do here is that you just put self right here. Oh, let me just double click here. And then I'm just gonna use that here. I'm gonna do another double click there. I'm gonna select all those, press Q, and then it aligns everything. Right, now, great. I have the reference of my player controller. Now there's one more thing that we gotta do here, right? Is that on the player controller, now I need to get a reference of my player, right? So I can start to change the ear, legs, and all sorts. So I can actually use all those functions in here, in that. How can I do that? So the easy way to do this is that you're gonna, I think it's called get controlled POM. There we go. So this will get a controller POM. So let me just do a delay of, let's say, 2 seconds, and I'm gonna print the name of this thing here. File and save. Let's see what's gonna happen. You see I got BP character creation, which means that is the type, the right type. Let me just select that we are playing on, I'm gonna play as a client. The reason why I'm playing as a client is because I want to see if I won't have any issue. All right, that's fine. So now it's trying error, but I guess we don't need to worry about this right now. We can worry about that later. So don't worry. I'm just gonna revert back to standalone because up to this part there's no server communication. Right. So now we got the reference. Everything is perfect. Now we gotta do something here that we can do this in a different ways. For example, this returns a POM object reference, right? But what we're looking for is a character creation reference. How can you change that? How can I get the right type? There's a couple of ways of doing this, and this time I'm gonna do it using an interface. So if you're not using an interface, you can just do this cast to BP character creator, right? And that's it. That's pretty much all you need. And then you create this as a variable called the player POM ref. All right. Make sure it's public. And that's pretty much all we need if you're using the cast. All right. And this probably would be easy to do this on local because we don't have any kind of a server related or anything like that. We could even go back to here And now if you go back to your component, for example, right, we can just print, let's say, the controller reference. As you can see, maybe if I just add a delay of 2 seconds, compile and save. 1, 2, there you go, got the reference right there. So what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna delete the event begin play. I'm gonna delete this. I'm gonna go back to the character creator, and I'm not gonna use a cast. I'm gonna use something called interface. All right. It sounds complicated, but it's gonna be it works in the same way, but it's faster. Because remember, when you're trying to create a game, you need to look for performance most of the time, right? Unless you're creating a simple game, but for an MMO, imagine that we need to handle, let's say, potentially 1 million players, right? Right, so we're gonna right click here. I'm gonna go back to blueprints, and in here, I'm gonna select blueprint interface. You can read the description, but basically what an interface does is a contract between 2 classes that allow us to execute events without having to have the reference. By passing the reference, they know what they're doing. Basically, you're creating a contract that works between 2 classes, and this is the middleman, as we say. And I'm just gonna call this BPI and character creation. All right. Now I'm gonna open up this. This is gonna look very empty, doesn't have anything. And one thing, I'm gonna create one method here, right? If you don't have this function, you can delete it, but you can just go back here and add a new function. And the way I like to call interfaces, I like to always add a prefix called I dash and then the function name. So in this case, we need to get the player palm reference, right? So we're gonna call this get player palm character character creation type, right? As you can see, the function is quite long, but really code doesn't matter how long is your function. This is more for the human part, like to make it easy to understand what it's trying to do. I'd always recommend as well to add descriptions to functions as well and create them in categories. In this case, we're gonna just put in player, all right? So we got our code organized. Right, this is gonna basically have an output, okay? So every time I call this function, I get an output. And this is gonna be called player on ref. And the reference is going to be the BP character creator. So BP character creator. Make sure you're returning the object reference. All right, file and save, and that's great. So the next thing you got to do here is then we need to learn how to use it. To use the interface is very simple. You're gonna want to open up your class that you want to implement this for, right? And in this case, it's this character creator. I'm gonna go back to class settings, and I am gonna go back to implemented interfaces. I'm gonna add, and I'm gonna search for BPI, right? And I'm gonna select this interface. Now you're probably gonna notice that we have a new item here called interfaces player, and then I have here interface called I get player pawn character creator type, right? All you gotta do here is just return self. Not select, sorry, self. That's it. Compile and save. Great. Now what happened is that we need to learn how to use this. So now the place where we use this, it's here, remember, on the blueprint player controller. So what I can do here is that from this get controller palm, which is the reference to this object, but it doesn't have the right type, I can just call I get get player pawn character type creator. And I am gonna add it here, and I'm gonna do it like this. All right. Now, there is a problem with this logic right here, right? And I'm gonna explain the problem. The problem is that this passed the reference in here, right, to our BPC actor component, but it's passing too fast. I would like to choose when I want to set this up. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna create a custom event, and I'm gonna call this events. For any event, I always like to put API dash. You don't have to do this, by the way. This is just how I like to implement the name of my events. You could even do maybe event and then you have the name, but I like to put API because at the end of the day you're trying to talk with this class. But and I'm gonna call this start, or I can just call this boot, or boot, yeah, just call boot, which means it's starting, right? Compile and save here. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a controller reference. I'm gonna do it like that. So we need to pass the reference. This one probably is gonna run locally, so but we can leave it as do not replicate. Right, so now how can we access that, right? So what we can do here is that we can call the method API boot, right? Do it like that. And this is gonna go like here. Compile and save. And now what we can do is that we can just do a print and see if we are getting our player controller. And most important of all, if from the player controller we get the player palm reference. Right. Let's see if it works. As you can see, I got a character creation controller and I got the player palm reference, right? And that's pretty much what we need for this tutorial, guys. So what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna stop this lesson because it got quite long so far. And then in the next one, we're gonna implement the UI for this. So once again, thank you very much for watching and I see you in the next one.